Like a egotistical thing in a way because we're kind of putting ourselves into things that aren't really for us. We hold on to a lot of things that have no real way to serve who we are. There are a lot of issues and things we allow to linger in our minds without reference to reality or how the real world actually functions. The way I see it, we drink the very poison that makes us ill in the hopes that one day we'll be able to make ourselves an antidote for the poison that we're giving ourselves. But the problem with this finding of an antidote, this finding of a solution, is often we try to do it mentally. We try to think through a lot of our issues or think through things that maybe don't need to be thought through or maybe aren't really issue. We're trying to think of an antidote and have it apply to us in a physical sense. A lot of our issues cannot be simply just thought through. Overthought often posits, false meaning in real events. It attributes so much of our personality and our personal, security and feelings into events that maybe don't necessarily need them. It's kind of like a egotistical thing in a way because we're kind of putting ourselves into things that aren't really for us, or we think that it applies to us, or we think that these certain things and certain happenings are certainly like personal to who we are, personal to how we're interacting with the world around us. And a lot of these things that we worry about do nothing but take up space and time in our heads. They don't posit much in the reality. Overthought doesn't give you an ability to, think through that issue because often the things we're overthinking about aren't things that we're able to solve, or they're not things that we should be solving or even overthinking about. It's mainly worry about things that will be. And ultimately, we have no control over those sort of circumstances. We posit too much feeling and emotion into things that we are unable to control. And the sooner that we come to the realization that these things aren't within our control, the sooner we're going to be able to truly benefit from the practices we do to heal from these sort of things. Because once we realize that we don't have the control, a lot of our issues that have to do with control will no longer be. They are simply accepting things as they are. They may be negative in a certain circumstance, but if it's not in your control, then why worry about the outcome, or why worry about it in general? It's like taking a test. After you take it, there's nothing more you can do. So any thought about it isn't necessarily going to change your grade or change how it happened because you already did the things that put it in place. And a lot of the times we don't even do the actions that put these certain events in place, yet we act as if we're solely responsible and we're the only person, or that we're going to take such a brunt force from this event, when in reality it's probably just going to brush over our shoulders like most things do. We hold on to these things that somewhat causes pain in the expectation that magically it's going to change nature with just thought alone. If all we can do in a certain situation is think about it, then it's probably not worth thinking about. If any of our thought doesn't lead to any action, doesn't lead to any event or planning or anything that could help us out or benefit us in the future, then any type of realistic overthought is doing nothing for you but stressing you out and making your present moment that much more stressed. The tool that is the mind solves issues, but if we're not giving it a certain thing that's able to be solved, then it's doing nothing but looping back in circles, and that's why we find ourselves in that state of overthought where it just keeps on going and just keeps on repeating. Like I myself try to think through a lot of my issues or think through a lot of the stuff going on with me, but ultimately it doesn't help. The things that actually help is when I put stuff into practice, when I kind of take my own words or take my own advice and monitor like what I'm conscious of, monitor what I'm letting myself act out, monitor my reactions to these certain stimulus that kind of plague who we are, because we compound upon the things that make us feel certain ways, and that's why they tend to be more cyclic. We attach them to certain behaviors and mannerisms that we act out in everyday life, and it makes us unable to enact those certain things without, reopening a wound. If you can't take action thought has no purpose other than reinstituting that you aren't in control of the situation. And I think that in your lack of control, you should try to the main aim should be to try to find some peace. And when I say peace, I'm not talking about like being happy all the time or being at a state where you're constantly, you know, uplifted or like, ooh, this is fun. But like a peace like void of issue. I feel like we overlook peace too much in our modern day society. Peace is something that we kind of have valued as, you know, such a great thing, but in reality, peace is just the absence of problem. And a lot of us view that as boredom, and we somewhat plunge ourselves into these constant issues as a means to somewhat get some type of vitality within our life. And we don't appreciate, you know, the quiet moments that we have with ourselves in a constant search of some sort of entertainment. And I feel like that's partially due to social media because we're so used to like short-term gratification and constantly getting entertainment at our beck and call that whenever it's peaceful, we feel like something's wrong, or we feel like we're bored, or we feel like we need a certain stimulus in order to, you know, posit ourselves as someone that's happy rather than accepting what peace is. We lose a lot of who we are in obsession about things that are outside of us. If we only look at what's outside, we fail to process all that we are within. And what is within us is what we allow our minds to be stuck with.
Religious dog, man.
Have you seen the
Move
cards?
your fucking hand.
The car.
Oh, that's crazy.
Our reality and how we are interacting with our current, you know, self and our environment is directly related to how the world around us, you know, is. It's because we don't, you know, value peace that we're constantly finding ourselves be in those situations. Because what we're aiming for is to be shaken up. We're aiming for these mundane issues so as to give ourselves a little boost of entertainment or to have the duality. Because it can be said, and it is true, that you need to somewhat experience the bad in order to know what the good is. But I feel like that can only be done in a certain moderation that allows you to be mentally healthy. Because I feel like peace is like, it's not necessarily a flat line. It's being okay with the ups and downs and the ridges of life rather than viewing them as such monumental things when in reality that's all life is. It is the heartbeat. It's the up and downs that make you alive. If it was all still, then that would be nothing but death. Nothing worth, you know, your actual attention or yourself or your positing of your will or your ego within these certain situations. And with letting things go, you know, a lot of things don't serve you. They aren't for you to constantly be thinking about. And they're not beneficial to your mental health. I think with a lot of things we should prioritize peace. And I'm not saying like if you did something negative, something you did bad and it's morally messing you up, then by all means it should. But with things that are simply just not in our control, you know, it's one thing to ignore, you know, these things, which I think you shouldn't do. And it's another thing to accept that they're here, accept that these things are real, these things are a part of your existence, and allowing yourself to not take it personally or not attribute that to who you are as a person. Rather, allow things to be negative outside of your view. Because I say like focus on the positive so much, but that doesn't mean ignore the negative. It's like when we do have that downtime, when we do have that thought and we allow it to be negative, especially about ourselves, that's a real issue. I think that we should only posit positivity within ourselves. So like when we're thinking about how we are, unless we did something, why not posit yourself as a great person? Why not posit a positive image of yourself so you can act in a manner that's befitting of yourself? You know, hold yourself to a high standard, but not too high, so as to allow yourself to fall into certain pathways of action that even you yourself are proud of and okay with.